When you look ahead, let's say decades ahead, perhaps even, how do you think the future will look back on this time, this era in civil society, and what salient points will rise to the top?
Well, if I summed it up in a phrase, I would borrow Daniel Patrick Moynihan's great line about defining deviancy down, which is that the idea that we've become accustomed to a country in which every third month there is an act of barbarism in one of our schools, and we sort of blink at it and barely pause, is an indication that we are becoming accustomed and almost indifferent to what ought to be outrages. And this is not simply in the matter of school shootings. I mean, you can talk about as, in the comportment of our political leaders, and go down the list. There's been, we have allowed behavior that used to be considered utterly deviant to be normalized. And I'm afraid that a future generation is going to kind of look back on that and wonder how we sort of permitted ourselves, like proverbial lobsters in a pot, to accept ever greater levels of this kind of deviancy. Now, one of the things I take heart in is you can think of recent American history, or at least living history, and find all sorts of occasions or examples where we thought we had a trend line that was moving inexorably in one direction, and it turned out that the trend line just stopped. It changed. New York City in 1990 was a city that tolerated 2,600 murders in a single year. Nowadays, we're talking about 300 or 400 murders. You can go to communities across the country that people thought were lost and find incredible evidence of revitalization. So I've never wanted to think that trends are truth. I think that when we think about these are reversible phenomena, but you have to kind of apply an active moral sense when you're thinking about it.
Mm. How would you characterize mainstream media's role in this era of civility or uncivility?
Oh, that's such a small topic. My colleague Frank Bruni gave a speech in one of the University of California schools, I forgot which one, but the title of the speech is "The Media is Not Fake, but it's Flawed." And I thought that was important. It was important coming from kind of a leading voice in like mainstream media, if you will. We're flawed because the media is composed of individuals, who are screwing up all the time, 24/7. I mean,
humans.
Human beings, and doing so, by the way, in ways that other mess-ups are doing so in ways that are far more visible than mistakes being made in other fields of life. So once it's in print, it's immediately visible, it's dissected, and so on. The second thing is, I think that I would make a couple points. We've become, as an institution, too obsessed with what we imagine are the demands of our consumers, the reader, rather than what we, as experienced editors and writers, think an educated citizen ought to know. So if I could make one change, I guess this is on the record and whatever. But if I could make one change to our website at the New York Times, I'd get rid of that trending list. Because what's trending is always going to be the headline people are clicking on because they want to read that hot take on Trump's latest tweet, right? But what's trending and what's important are two totally different things. And I think, just one final point. I mean, I'm a great believer in liberal democracy, but I'm also a believer in the concept of authority, that some people, through experience, knowledge, whatever, earn authority, and that authority ought to have its place and respect. The authority that, whether it's a Marty Baron or a Dean Baquet, the editors of these great newspapers, that was earned over years of experience. Their judgment matters, and it helps. I think the best companies like Apple in its day and the best newspapers ought to be able to say to the consumer, this is what you want. You don't know you want this, but this is actually what you want. And how do we reclaim that in a world in which so many decisions are simply driven by what we perceive to be the needs or demands of the market rather than what, a set of people think, this is where we ought to go?